A person walking through a bustling terminal in Paris stops at a kiosk to buy a train ticket. They pay with a credit card, and the transaction receipt displays their name, their seat number, and the exact time of their journey. Even without a photo, that receipt is personal data because it points directly to an individual. In the GDPR, personal data is formally defined as any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. In simple terms, it is any breadcrumb that can lead to you. It isn't just your name or passport number. It is anything that makes you a specific human being rather than just a face in the crowd. Think about someone wearing a bright red scarf who ordered an extra short latte at a cafe. If that detail is recorded alongside other info, it becomes a piece of personal data. You have probably seen this at the office where someone circulates a team analysis spreadsheet. They might remove the names thinking it is anonymous, but they leave in birth dates, job titles, and specific home zip codes. Guess what? That is still personal data. If a reasonable person can connect those dots to identify you, the data is regulated. It is a broad net and it catches more than most people realize. So, now that we've mastered the core concept of what exactly counts as personal data, you might be wondering how we distinguish between the different players who are actually handling that data. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the difference between a controller and a processor. Consider a massive financial institution in Frankfurt launching a new credit card campaign. The bank's board meets, defines the target audience, sets the budget, and decides that they need to send out personalized loan offers. The bank is the controller. They are the boss who determines the purpose and the why of the processing. Now, the bank doesn't have the technical team to mail out millions of letters, so they hire an external IT firm to manage the printing and logistics. That IT firm is the processor. They are the service provider doing the grunt work on behalf of the bank. The distinction here is one of authority. The controller decides why the data is used, while the processor decides how to physically manage the technical operation based on the controller's instructions. If the IT firm suddenly decided to sell that customer list to an insurance company for its own profit, it would be acting illegally because it exceeded its mandate. It is a relationship built on strict authority. You have likely seen this at the office when your company hires a payroll firm. Your company is a controller, the one who legally owes the salary, and the payroll firm is the processor, simply acting as the specialized tool to cut the checks. So, now that we have mastered the roles of those calling the shots versus those doing the work, you might be wondering what we actually mean when we talk about the processing itself. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the broad, sweeping definition of data processing. A hotel front desk in Rome takes your passport, scans it into their computer, stores the file in a server, prints a registration card, and eventually deletes the file after you check out. You might think processing only happens when the computer is running, but the legal definition is much wider. Processing is any operation performed on personal data, whether by automated or manual means. It includes collection, recording, organizing, storing, altering, consulting, using, and even the final act of erasing. If a clerk at the front desk is just looking at a customer list on their screen to see if a room is available, that is processing. If they move a digital file from one folder to another, that is processing. If they put a paper document through a shredder, that is processing. It covers the entire life cycle of the data from the moment it enters your building until the moment it is destroyed. Because the definition is so comprehensive, it is almost impossible to handle a piece of information without processing it. You have to realize that every time your finger touches a record, you are triggering a regulatory requirement. So now that we have mastered how wide the net is for what counts as processing, you might be wondering how we handle data that is extra sensitive. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is special categories of data. Imagine a specialized medical clinic in Berlin holding records on patients. They aren't just storing names or credit card details. They are holding information about chronic illnesses, mental health histories, and genetic markers. This is special category data, and it requires a much higher level of protection because it carries a significant risk of discrimination. This category includes racial or ethnic origin, political opinions, religious beliefs, trade union membership, biometric data used for identification, and information concerning a person's sexual orientation. Think of it as high security data. If this information leaks, it could ruin a person's career, their insurance coverage, or their social standing. You have probably seen this at the office, where a manager accidentally shares a note about an employee's confidential medical leave in an open Slack channel. That is a major data breach of special category data. Because the potential harm to the individual is so profound, the rules for handling this data are significantly more rigid than for standard contact information. You cannot just treat this like any other file. It needs a locked room approach. So now that we have mastered why certain data needs a locked room approach, you might be wondering how we ensure this data actually reaches the right destination safely. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is data subjects and consent. A local fitness studio in Madrid wants to feature a customer in an Instagram advertisement. They snap a photo of a member, but they don't ask for permission because the member didn't explicitly say no. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of the data subject, the human being at the center of the data. The data subject has the right to control their identity, and a core part of that power is consent. Consent must be freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. It cannot be buried in a 50-page legal contract, and it certainly cannot be a pre-ticked box that you have to manually uncheck. If the studio takes your photo and posts it without you saying yes clearly and knowing exactly how that photo will be used, that is not valid consent. You have probably seen this when you visit a website and a pop-up asks you to accept cookies. If the design makes it harder to say no than to say yes, or if the purpose is hidden, the company is failing the consent test. It is all about giving the human being a genuine choice. So, now that we've mastered how we treat people as data subjects and how we ask for their permission, you might be wondering how all these definitions come together in a legal document. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the data protection officer and accountability. Picture an e-commerce giant in London preparing for a yearly audit. They have a data protection officer or DPO who acts as the expert guardrail for the entire company. Accountability is the gold standard of European data protection. It means the controller is not only responsible for following the rules, but must be able to demonstrate that they are following them. You don't just follow the principles, you keep the logs, you conduct the impact assessments, and you create an audit trail that proves it. Think of the DPO like a pilot's co-pilot. They aren't the ones flying the plane, but they are constantly watching the dials, checking the flight plan, and ensuring the company doesn't veer off course. Whether it is a global tech company or a small law firm in Dublin, if they handle data, they need a clear strategy to show they are responsible. You are not just building a product or a service, you are building a reputation for integrity and professional conduct. You now have the full vocabulary to navigate the complexities of European data protection with the confidence of an expert. You have the tools, the definitions, and the framework to protect the rights of the individuals you serve.